to host this presentation of the award-winning novel, The Lady from Tel Aviv, with the author present, Raba'i Al-Madhoun. He is joined by Elliott Colla, who translated the book from Arabic into English, as well as Zeina Azzam, who is going to interview Raba'i about the book. Soon, you will be seeing a lot more of Zeina Azzam, as she will be joining the staff of the Jerusalem Fund in just a matter of days as our new executive director. We look forward. I don't know why I'm shaking. We look forward to working with Zeina as she leads the organization forward into a new phase. Okay, so for today's event, in The Lady from Tel Aviv, Raba'i Al-Madhoun tackles the Arab-Palestinian-Israeli issue, focusing on a pivotal time of anxiety and suspicion with tensions on the point of boiling over. The novel's protagonists are Palestinian exile Walid Dahman, who's returning home to Gaza after many years in Europe, and Israeli Dana Ahuva, who happens to be sitting next to him on the plane as they go into Tel Aviv's Ben-Gurion airport. Their dialogue takes the reader into the far realms of memory, history, and the self. And it is a novel that, in its complexity, intricacy, and ambiguity, avoids the dogma of ready-made ideology. Raba'i Al-Madhoun was born in Al-Majd al-Ashkelon in 1945. Along with his parents, he was displaced during the 1948 ethnic cleansing of their homeland and spent his childhood in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. He moved to London in the 1980s and worked for some of the most prominent Arabic language newspapers. He is currently an editor at the leading Arabic daily Al-Sharq al-Aswad. The author of several literary works, The Lady from Tel Aviv was shortlisted for the Independent Prize for Arabic Fiction in 2010 and is his first work to be translated into English. Elliott Colla is a prominent translator of modern Arabic fiction, including novels by Ibrahim al-Koni, Ibrahim Aslan, and Idris Ali. He's the author of a study of Egyptology in modern Egyptian thought entitled Conflicted Antiquities, Egyptology, Egyptomania, Egyptian Modernity, and a crime novel entitled Baghdad Central. He teaches Arabic literature at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And Zeina Azzam, formerly Director of Educational Outreach at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies at Georgetown University, Zeina has worked in the field of education and Middle East affairs for over 30 years. She is a published poet and a freelance writer with works that have appeared in Al Jazeera English, Jadaliya.com, Mizna, Calliope, and Social Education. She holds an MA in Arabic Literature from Georgetown University. So our format today will be an interview between Zeina Azzam and Raba'i Al-Madhoun, followed by readings from the book conducted by Al-Madhoun and Elliott Colla. And last, we have some free copies of the book that you're welcome to take on your way out of here. I hope we run out. So help yourself. It's a fascinating book. So we can start now.
Thank you. Well, first let me say how honored I am really to be taking this position at the Jerusalem Fund. I'm really so pleased to be contributing a small part in moving to the amazing work that the Jerusalem Fund does. And very pleased today to be part of this event at the Jerusalem Fund, and honored really to be with Mr. Raba'i Al-Madhoun and Professor Elliott Colla, who I took a course with a few years ago on Palestinian literature. I have to say it was one of the best courses I've ever taken at Georgetown. And in it we read The Lady from Tel Aviv in Arabic. That was, it had just come out. And little did I know that he would be then translating it. I don't think he knew that at that time either. And that we would be sitting here today. So this is really wonderful. I have a few questions prepared for Mr. Al-Madhoun. And then I will be asking him and Professor Colla to be reading some passages from the book. And after which I hope we'll have enough time also to take some of your questions. So the first question I would like to address to you, Mr. Al-Madhoun, is every book has a story, every book has a reason why it was written. You have a really amazing and rich past in terms of your history with Palestine, the many cities you've lived in, the different kinds of positions you've held as a journalist, as a writer. So could you tell us why you wrote this book?
First of all, forgive my English. When I learned it at school in a refugee camp, our teacher used to shout, particularly, and we just shout, particularly. And then when I came to England, I discovered that I learned nothing but English. It's something, we learned rubbish English, and I started learning again. So forgive me if I couldn't speak it fluently. For the question, there is a story, a big story behind this story. It comes that I got my passport, the British passport, for the first time. So the first time I have a real passport in my life. Always I used to move with a fake passport. Sometimes I buy it, sometimes some friend help to issue it. Around 7 passports I had in my life. So when I got that passport, I said to myself that it's time to go back to see my mother and the family. That comes after 38 years. So I asked myself, I am a writer, I wrote 3 books, I've written 3 books before, and I think this is a big story, this is a big event, not for myself, but for anyone. And I don't think there are a lot of people who have this story. 40 years abroad, 40 years you haven't seen your family, 40 years having your childhood friends, etc., etc. So this is a big story. It's been a challenge between me and my wife, who's sitting there in the first seat. Are you going to make a story from a trip? I told her, yes, that's a big story, and I will make a very successful novel. Then, how could I do that? I will depend on what will happen during the trip. Actually, I had an idea of a guy who lived in, a Palestinian guy who lived for 30-something years in Germany. He married there, but he couldn't integrate with the society, and he rejected everything. He divorced his wife and decided to go back to Gaza and became, or regain his Palestinianity again. So I have this story, but I have to go through that story and examine it during the trip itself. So that's the idea behind folding that story with my story. So that will take us maybe the second question between fiction and reality. I went when I went to the airplane, I got my seat, I start looking at the faces of the people. That's from Ethiopia, that's a Jew, that's Israeli, Israeli white, Israeli black, Israeli fat, Israeli, seems he's extreme religion, so on, so on, so on. So who's going to sit beside me? I decided in that moment, who's going to sit behind me will be another character. I am the main character. I have Adil Bashiti. The other character is this guy who's sitting at me. And suddenly, that lady, Orly Vinerman, she's an actress, a TV actress. She had 3 series, well known in Israel, and she's a model, etc., etc. And she came and sat beside me. So we have the whole story now. I have myself, I have Walid Dahman, which is the shadow of me, whatever you can call it, and we have Dana, but which is Orly, but I don't know anything about Orly, but I have to get something from Orly. So I started to find a way to talk to her, and I failed once, twice, and 3rd time, and suddenly she started to cry, and I find this strange thing happening. A lady beside me crying, what's going on? So I asked her, she rejected, etc. Then we start to build a relation. For a few minutes, we get used to each other, and we start talk about the normal question, Palestinian and Israeli, Sharon in that time, Arafat, Abbas, and all this story, what she think, what I think. We talked a little bit. I found out that she could be moderate leftist, something like that. I like this character, and we forget the matter. Yeah, we just arrived, everyone. She went to Tel Aviv, I went to Gaza. That's the real story, actually. 6 months later, I went to my office in Holborn in London, and I used to read 3 Arabic newspapers, Al-Quds Al-Arabi, Sharq Al-Awsat, and Al-Hayat, which I worked with them before. I like this newspaper. I get the other, and I start reading the Al-Hayat. I read the first half. I turned the second half. I found the title that Saif al-Islam al-Qaddafi has a relation, what you call ashiqa, has an affair with an Israeli actress. When I looked to the picture, oh my God, I saw this lady. Who's that lady? I found out when I read that the lady is Orly Vinerman, who was sitting beside me. Then we have another story. That lady, then I got the line now, the real line, that this lady, when she wept, when she cried in the airplane, I got the answer that I remind her with Saif al-Islam because of my accent. In the airplane, he told me that I like your accent, but why she likes my accent, which is not it. I don't like my accent. Why she like it? Then I found the answer that typically, I believe that Saif al-Islam Qaddafi has the same accent. Then I start build the fiction side of this story. I create their relation, where they go, where they, etc., 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 and so I have the whole characters and I have everything. And then I went to Gaza and start build what I have in my mind with the reality on during the trip. The streets, the cities, what's reminding with the past, all that mixed together. In fact, despite I know that you have a lot of questions, but I might answer most of them together. What is fiction? What you believe is fiction in the story? It might not be fiction. What you believe, fact, it might not be fact. Why? I will answer the question directly. Because the situation in Palestine is over fiction. You can't, even if you fictionize anything, you couldn't describe the situation in Palestine. For example, if you think that the soldier is very rude, very racist, dealing with the Palestinian with the most oppression way, that's not enough. Go and watch him. Deal with him as a human being. And just watch that a human being, what he's going to do with a Palestinian in a checkpoint. Then you get the answer. Is this what the Palestinians suffer? Is it fact, real, or fiction? So from this point, I get through mixing fiction with reality. I take the reality far to the fiction, and I bring the fiction down to the reality, and that's the whole story behind the story.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the lady from Tel Aviv, Dana Ahuva, actually sat next to you on a plane, and that's where you got the idea. And in one of your interviews, in your past interviews, you say that you were experimenting with putting an ordinary Palestinian and an ordinary Israeli in a novel, and to see they would be without pressure and see what happens to allow them to interact as human beings. And so we see that the Israeli character is complex and she's human and we're sympathetic toward her. So what were the reasons you wanted to introduce such a character, and were you inspired by those before you, like Ghassan Kanafani in Return to Haifa, and Mahmoud Darwish with Rita, and others? Did you want to sort of build on that experiment?
I'm not inspiring by anyone. I try to create my own style, and this is what makes this story is different. It has its own narrating. It's new in the Arab fiction and novels. From that point, I want to break down the typical or the التقليدي, the traditional way of dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and get rid of any ideology of that. I don't want to dominate the characters, don't want to dominate anything, don't want to change anything. Just I wanted two people, Jews, Israelis, Palestinian, that doesn't matter, human being in a place, just like these two people who fight for 100 years and couldn't find a solution. I want to bring them to this space and start and let them express themselves. Yeah, and that's what I have done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting to me that the character of Dana actually suggested a title of the book that the protagonist, Walid Dahman, was writing in the novel. And it kind of brought up for me the whole idea of light and shadow. You talk a lot about light and shadow and the sun. In the beginning of the book, you talk about how the sun rises and sets over a settlement, Nisanit, and how it's stolen. Anyway, it seems like these themes of light and shadow are coming up often in the book.
Yeah, it's kind of technique. I use it just to highlight some points of the occupation. Gaza was under occupation at that time when I was visited. And I want to say in one sentence or in a few words the whole story of the occupation. You yourself could imagine yourself living in Gaza Strip in a house and wake up in the morning and look to the light and the sun is rising and coming through your window. I put myself there and imagine how it could be. I find it that with occupation there is no light. What happened is the sun came from the east, passed in the morning over Nazareth, I think, settlement. Then there the Israelis stole the sun, stole the light, and the light arrived, Walid Dahman in his room, used. So what he can do, I think he can wash it like other people, because it's dirty. It's not the pure sun. There is an occupation. He used to wash it, clean it, and let it go. So he spent his day. But unfortunately, after noon, and when the sunset comes, the settlement in Qatif, next to the beach, also stole it again and get the sun too. So I played this technique to show the whole situation in just one sentence, that the sun rise used, or I don't know, there is an expression Colla used for that. In Arabic we say that it's been used. Just sun, a used sun. It's enough to say that there is no light under occupation. And I use it, I use it again and again with the Job, the, what you call it, prophet? Yeah, with the traditional way in order to see, to give kind of, to light our tradition. And I use it also for a very funny, very nice idea. Is that we have two people in the same land. So Walid and Dana returning home. Everyone's saying that I'm returning home. She's going to Tel Aviv. Oh, yeah, bro, I love my country. This is where I born, and I love it. I love Tel Aviv, etc. And he's going back and saying, oh, this is Palestine. I'm going to Palestine, etc. So we have two people. We have two characters in the same land. We have two people in the same land. So we have one house. We don't have two houses. We have one house for two. So from here, I create the idea of one house for two. Then when the sun rises, everything has one shadow. But it's strange. This house has two shadows. Then Dana came with the idea of house with two shadows. Shadows for a house, something like that. So it was, for me, it was amazing and interesting to deal with that technique, playing with light and shadow and dark, etc., etc.
Would you like to read that part in the book, and then we'll ask
sure,
Professor
but
Colla
that's
to
in
read
Arabic,
it in
yeah?
English? Yeah. So this will be in Arabic, and then we'll have the English translation afterwards.
Up to it, yeah. تتوقف للحظات، ترفع رأسها إلى أعلى، تحدق في المصباح الباهت المعلق فوق رأسينا، ثم تعود وتلتفت إلي وتضيف: لمع في ذهني عنوان جميل لروايتك التي لم تزل في بطن أمها، ظلان لبيت واحد. ما رأيك؟ ظلان لبيت واحد؟ أتظاهر بالتفكير في اقتراحها، وأحك ذقني بأطراف أصابعي مثل مخرج سينما احتار في قبول لقطة انتهى من تصويرها ولم يقنعه أداء ممثليه، بينما تنظر إلي بترقب، ثم أؤمم. اسمع. تقطع أمأمتي من وسطها لتقول بصوت تتخلله نبرة قلق واضحة: في هذه البلاد التي نتجه إليها معا ونفترق فيها معا، أرض واحدة وبيت واحد، ما أن تشرق الشمس وتسقط أشعتها عليه حتى ينبت له ظلان. نحن يا وليد ظلان لمأساتين اجتمعتا في مكان واحد. ما حدث لنا ترك ظلالا سوداء عليكم، وما يحدث لكم يصبغنا بظلال أكثر سوادا. ظلان لبيت واحد. حقا عبر تاريخها الطويل كانت هذه الأرض مزرعة للظل والضوء، يتجليان في تناقضهما الأزلي لكي يستمر. انظري إلى الظل، إنه كيان قائم بذاته، لا يلد إلا في الضوء ولا يموت إلا في العتمة، مخلوق غريب شديد الحساسية، يتشكل في اللحظة التي يلد فيها الضوء ويختفي حين يموت، وهو صبور مثل أيوب، يتحمل دوس أقدامنا حين تتعامد الشمس فوق رؤوسنا ونسحقه. أنت لا تعرفين أيوب يا دانا، إنه نبي، يعتقدون أن الدود نهش لحمه. يحتفل الغزاويون مثل سكان الإسكندرية المصريين بعيده مرة كل عام بالذهاب إلى البحر والاستحمام فيه. يعتقدون أن أيوب كان يغتسل في يوم أربعاء معين من كل عام لكي تشفي ملوحة البحر جراحه المثخنة وتطهر جسده حتى العام التالي.
She looks up at the small lamp above our heads and studies it for a few moments, then turns to me and adds, "I've got an idea for the title of this novel that's still sitting in the belly of its mother. One House, Two Shadows. What do you think?" One house, two shadows. I pretend to think about her suggestion. My fingers curl around my chin like a director unconvinced by the performance of his actors. She looks at me and I continue. Finally, she cuts me off midstream. "Listen, in this country you and me are headed to together, there's a note of nervousness that makes her voice quaver. In this country where you and I will separate and go our own ways, there is only one land, only one place to live, only one house. Even so, when the sun rises over the place and casts its rays across the land, you see two shadows. Walid, you and I are two shadows thrown together in a single place. What happened to my people cast black shadows over yours. What's happened to you makes the shadows of us, over us, darker still. We are two people who will never be at ease. And whenever things seem to be calming down, they get even worse. One house that has two shadows. It's true. Throughout history, this land was a field for sowing, shadow, and light. Only in their essential opposition do light and shadow take shape and last. Look at shadow. It's born in light and dies in darkness. What a strange, fragile thing. It comes to life as soon as light is born and disappears when the light dies. Shadow is patient. It's like Job. It bears us and perseveres when it is high noon and our footsteps crush the shadows underfoot. You don't know Job, do you? He's a prophet who people believe, suffered from flesh-eating worms. Like Alexandrians, Gazans celebrate Job each year by going and swimming in the sea. They believe that Job used to go on a certain Wednesday each year to bathe himself in the sea, knowing that the salt water would heal his burning wounds and cleanse his body for an entire year.
May I just turn quickly to Professor Colla? Could you tell us what drew you to this novel and why you wanted to translate it?
Well, I think something that Raba'i has already said was what struck me immediately on reading the novel. It's a good story in the sense that you can sit down and immediately get immersed into a story with rich, large characters and very, very real situations, powerful situations. Some of them are funny, some of them are tragic. But what struck me immediately was that it diverges from the sort of ideological messages that you find in other novels from Israel-Palestine, in the sense that what's being described here are really small human interactions that have big shadows behind them, right? But there's no slogans, no sloganeering here, and this isn't to make judgments on other kinds of literature. It's just to say that the novel really is a story about a son going home to see his mother for the first time in 38 years. And the fact that this is a real story rooted in the author's own life makes the details very, very convincing. This is a real experience that Raba'i has lived through, but it's an extreme experience, right? And that if you were to read that in fiction, you might think, well, no one would leave their mother 38 years. When I told my mother that, she said, this is unrealistic. And I said, well, this is what happened. And so it's a very extreme situation, but the novel renders it over and over again in very light or tangible, concrete ways, and that's its real power. That's really contrary to the image of Gaza we get, right? The image of Gaza we get is usually from 30,000 feet above or from a distance. Usually there's some dust in the air, some explosions. Maybe we'll see some individual bodies. This novel is filled with people talking, people living lives. It is a very different picture of Gaza from the ground up, from the individual life up, rooted in these family relationships, the son and his mother, cousins. And that all these things are what
it's
truly
not a media story.
Not a media story.
Not a media story. It's not the Palestinian you watch every day in the news. So this is something else. This is the real Palestinian and the real Israelis as well.
Reading the novel, Mr. Madhoun, reading the part when Walid Dahman, the protagonist, arrives in Gaza and at the checkpoint, and this is a very long, many pages description of what happens to him at the checkpoint. It is very poignant and very powerful in many ways. And I wonder if you could talk about that. Was this your experience at the checkpoint? Were there one or two characters whom you met there who really kind of spoke to you, who kind of touched your heart?
Well, as I said, it's mixed between reality and fiction. I mean, yes, I did spend 9 hours there, and I supposed to arrive at 9 o'clock, and I agreed with my mother on the phone that she's going to prepare a breakfast, and we'll take it together at 9 o'clock. And from 9 o'clock, I spent after that another 9 o'clock the checkpoint. But what happens, it's mixed. It's some kind of fiction. I met a lot of people. I choose my characters from them. I developed these characters and created my own way to, I don't change. I don't force them to give my ideology or my attitude toward the soldiers and the checkpoint, because it's normal. I just describe these small things happened. It's just there's a child want to go to the toilet, and he's just like that. Where to go? He couldn't go, and just describe that scene is enough to create a very nice scene, fiction scene, whether it is reality or not reality. That's what happened. And I like that part. Yes, I give all the details. And by the way, technically it's very slow part. It's not very. I use that technique also to put that pressure on the reader himself. So when you read it, you feel that you are under that pressure and you are waiting with Walid Dahman 9 hours on the checkpoints.
Absolutely. I can say that I felt this way. I kept wanting him to get through, and there was one more hurdle every time, and each time it was so gripping. And
Even
really
with the British passport, which is Walid, imagine that he's going to go through. It's 100 meters inside his country. Just for 100 meters, he spent 9 hours. How comes? So that's it.
Can I ask you to read the short passage, or part of the passage, where Walid sees his mother for the first time after
Yes.
38 years?
It's very short, and some audience, some readers said that, oh, how after 38 years? Just like that. You should say something else, but I believe that few sentences is just to give this 38 years is just with, it's like a camera, you focus it
163,
with
Elliott.
close up.
Okay.
وليد was وليد كان طالع
Going up the stairs?
upstairs اللي يشوف والدته كانت بتنتظره بغرفة. تقدمت خطوتين أخريين ثم التفت يمينا فاستقبلتني صرخة أمي: وليد يما، وليد يما، أهلا وسهلا يما، أهلا وسهلا، الحمد لله على السلامة. وليد عاش من شافك يا حبيبي. حاولت أمي أن تتكوم على نفسها فوق فراش قطني مد على الأرض، أن تتغلب على عجزها وتنهض واقفة ولو على ركبتيها، فلم أتركها تحاول. إذ ألقيت بنفسي عليها متخليا عن قامتي، دفنت وجهي في حضنها مثل طفل كنته ذات يوم. أغرقتها وأغرقتني بقبلات بعدد ما غبت من سنين، وبكينا حتى سمع من في الخارج آخر شهقاتنا، فدخلوا علينا تباعا صامتين مذهولين. جلست لصق أمي تاركا يدي معلقة في يدها كما كنت أفعل حين كنت صبيا، وكانت تجرني معها في مشاويرها وزياراتها، وأمضي ممسكا بيدها حينا وبذيل ثوبها أحيانا. هاي أبو فادي يا عمتي، صاح ناصر، منور قطاع غزة كله، هذا أسعد يوم في عمري، أنا عشت وشفت ابني بعد العمر الطويل. 100 أهلا وسهلا يا وليد. عقبت أمي ولم تزل تمسح بمنديل رأسها دمعا يرفض التوقف عن الهطول، بينما لم أكف عن تأملها باحثا بين ملامحها عن أمي.
I take a couple of last steps inside, turn to the right, and my mother shrieks, "Walid, my son, welcome home, my beautiful son. I'm so glad you made it. I'm so glad to see you, my lovely, lovely son." My mother is sitting hunched over herself on a cotton mattress on the ground. She tries as best she can to get up, if only to her knees, but I do not give her much of a chance. I bend down and bury my face in her shoulder, hugging her like the child I used to be. I kiss her, and she begins to kiss me in return, once for every year I've been away. Then we sit and weep. We go on crying, saying nothing. The others outside let us bawl and bawl until our sniffles and snorts come to an end. Silently, they file into the room with looks of astonishment on their faces. I sit right next to my mother. My hand clasps hers, just like it used to do when I was a child, and she would drag me behind her on errands or visits to people's homes. And I would go on running along after her, sometimes clutching her hand, sometimes gripping her dress. "Abu Fadi's here, Aunt," Nasser cries. "The brightness of your presence has lit up all Gaza, my son. This is the happiest day in my life. I've lived to see my boy after all these years. Welcome home, Walid. I say it 100 times. Welcome, welcome, welcome." My mother begins to wipe her tears with the end of her headscarf, but the tears refuse to stop pouring, and I, the whole time, watch her face, looking for traces of the mother I once knew.
Thank you.
Very powerful.
It's powerful. Last year, Professor Colla was interviewed by the English Penn Center, and the very last question of the interview was, in 3 words, how would you describe this book? And he said, home doesn't exist. I wonder if, Mr. Madhoun, you could talk about that, and do you think that's a fair characterization?
It still not exist. Well, I don't know. It goes to the question of the identity itself. So we have a character who, Palestinian, lived 38 years outside and abroad and coming back. The question was, what remained from Walid Dahman, from his identity, from his Palestinianity, how far he is Palestinian. So this is what this is the question of the story, or part of the story actually, and that question is maybe it's been answered for the first time. No one talk about that. When we say that the Palestinian everywhere that said he's Palestinian want to come back home, and he's asking for right of return. Yeah, I ask for right of return, but actually, does any Palestinian want to return after that or not return? We don't know. I have to examine that. I'm still asking the question. In my next novel, I will keep finding an answer for this question.
Can you tell us a little bit about your next novel?
Well, this story, as I said, has been the question of identity about Gaza, about the life of Gaza. My project, or my plan in writing, is to have 3 parts. So I'm getting Walid back again, Dana with a short time, but to check something else, actually to talk about the life in Israel. We have a character a Palestinian who stayed in Al-Majdal and Asqalan, where he was born, and then moved to Lod, the Arabic city. I followed that character, so I have this story. The second, you could say, a novella, inside novella. So I have a second novella. 2 Palestinian got an American passport. One has an Israeli passport. The other is a Palestinian from West Bank. They both loved each other. They married. They want to go back and live in Israel. Could they live? This is another question. What will happen? I don't know. Will they stay together? Will they leave? What they face in that? I don't know. So we have this story. The third story, or the third novel inside this novel, would be about a young girl who fell in love with a British soldier during the mandate, just before 1947. She is Armenian and live in Akka, and she escaped with him. And soon British left Palestine and withdrew with its army. She became British, and she integrated as British. And then, before she died, she asked her daughter to burn her body and to put it in a statue like her body and send it to Akka, to the house of her father. So we have these 3 stories, and during that I describe the life in the city. So we have we'll find the life in Jerusalem, and the life in Jaffa, and in Akka, and we had before Gaza. So I'm trying to cover the other part of Palestine. So maybe the third part, what remains there, we'll continue to find an answer for the same question. We'll never answer. I don't know if we could find an answer. So that's the idea of the third novel, which I think might be in 2-3 months. I don't know.
Ask about your treatment of dialogue between characters in the story, between the mother and her son, of course, they were speaking colloquial Palestinian, whereas with the woman in the plane, you used classical or standard. Is that because you were speaking in Arabic and you thought it made more sense to put it into standard Arabic, or are there other reasons involved also? Is the dialogue always in a colloquial when it's between Palestinians?
Yeah. It's not a matter between Palestinian. It depends on the character itself. If, for example, if Dana speaks Hebrew, so for the first time in a novel, an Arabic novel, a Palestinian novel, I give them the chance to speak in Hebrew. And that's what we call it moral superiority over the Israelis rather. I mean, تفوق أخلاقي, how you said that? Yeah, تفوق أخلاقي, or moral superiority over the Israelis, which I remember that in Haifa, they got the novel of Ghassan Kanafani, عائد إلى Haifa, and turned it to play on the theater. And when they did that, the Palestinians speak Hebrew. So that's strange. Why they do not give them the right to speak their language? This is kind of oppression there. So I did what the Israelis couldn't do because of my human inside. I want to reflect this. The Palestinians do not hate them because they are Jews or because so. No, they have the right to speak. So it's not a matter of Arabic or not Arabic. So there are an Italian phrases in the book. There are Russian in the book. So it depends on the character. The other side is I believe that Walid's mother cannot write her name. So how she could talk in a formal language, etc. So I mean, the character it chooses its language actually.
That actually poses some unique challenges for the translator as well. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, yeah, it's so Arabic is, as many of you probably know, or maybe all of you already know, Arabic is a diglossic language, meaning that there's a split between a formal written language and with a high register and the idiomatic language that people speak with. And so this novel has, Raba'i writes in both, depending on the situation and so on. And so there's a lot of colloquial, and it's very difficult to drop in and out of different registers. There's one very funny scene that I really enjoyed working with Raba'i to figure out how to do. In Gaza, there's a cousin who is a supporter of Hamas, and he presents himself as a religious authority. And so when he speaks, he's always trying to speak Quranic Fusha. And as we struggle to figure out, well, how would you do this in English? How would you everyone is speaking idiomatic English. And so what I chose was King James English with wouldest thou and so on. And that one we got lucky on that one. There's other phrases that are very colloquial and known in that are nearly impossible to translate. For instance, the phrase belediyat. Yes, right. Right. So. Well, that was long conversations, and a character runs into a character from the same. Well, a Palestinian character runs into a Palestinian character, and says "belediyat," which is what you would say if you run into somebody from your hometown in another town, or somebody from your country in another. You like a countryman or fellow countryman, but you're not going to say fellow countryman. And in fact, belediyat is more. It's not. You're not addressing somebody. You're stating
and more intimate as well.
Very intimate, right? So that was. So that was a fun thing to play with in this, and sometimes we got lucky, and it worked out.
Yes, would you like to ask a question?
I was wondering, where were you educated, and were you involved with anything that was going on like the struggle, which might have
Oh,
been
yeah.
underground, but you didn't land in, you were a young adult,
Yes.
and when
Yes.
you landed in London,
Yes.
so this different, then you came under different
Well,
education.
Well, I was born in Al-Qalan. When I moved, I was 3 years old. I went to Gaza with my family. From Gaza, I lived 16 years. After that, I went to Cairo. I studied 2 years in agriculture university. I failed there. I moved to Alexandria. I study history in Alexandria. I lived there 4 years. In the last year, I was involved with the Democratic Front, Palestinian Democratic Front, and enjoyed the struggle, yes, and involved in politics. I've been arrested and jailed and deported from the country in 1970. I lost everything. I lost the certificate. I have no certificate. I wasn't graduated. And I left to Syria. Syria sent me to Jordan. Jordan, I was a militant fighter with a gun, yes. And I never killed because I wasn't born to kill. I threw the gun. I hid it and spent the time watching the war. After that, the war of 1970, what we call it Black September. From Amman, I moved to Syria. I lived a year in Syria. After Syria, I went to Iraq. Iraq, I lived 2 years in Iraq. After Iraq, I went to Moscow. Moscow, I lived 1 year. From Moscow, I went back to Lebanon. Lebanon, I joined the Palestinian organization again. But this time, I start being journalist. I start my journalist era, and I wasn't being a fighter in any way, which is it's normal, but I wasn't because as I said, I wasn't created for this job. I created for something, was being created for something else. And then after that, I left Beirut to Nicosia. I lived with my family 12 years in Nicosia. After that, I didn't find any country to accept me. I have no passport, etc., etc. I found a passport. I took the family and went to immigrate again to London, where we lived for 20 years. So I have that education, but actually my experience is not the education, is this very, very long journey with different people, culture, etc., etc. That's all is me. And me is what answer the question is, what is to be Palestinian?
Thank you very much for your novel. You said yourself, and also Zeina said yourself, that the encounter with your mother after 38 years is very short in the novel. Yeah. So, but really, Professor Colla, when you read that, I am trying to recognize the mother that I once knew. It's very. So I was wondering, when you were writing this novel, whether you put constraints to yourself, limitation, because a novel is not poetry, for example. You know, you should be free to write how many pages, but why you limited only such a short encounter with your mother? I'm curious.
Because I want to bring the picture of the mother. We used to say, this is the mother, always holy, always so and so. This is part. The other part is the nostalgia. The Palestinians talk about Palestine with a lot of nostalgia and talk about their mother with nostalgia. I shorted it, make it very short, but strong and very deep in order to say, okay, that 38 years finished here, quickly and just like that. All the people you are expecting to see and hug and cry, etc., etc., after a few minutes became normal. This is your mother. That's it. So I want to break the idea of nostalgia in the Arabic novel. That's what's behind this, technically.
Actually, the mother as a figure is very very important in this novel, and she's
Yeah, you're going to see it in the different pages, in different
so maybe
scenes.
that part
So
is short.
you get
but
the whole idea about her, but that moment is just like
yeah,
that.
she figures prominently, and maybe we can read that passage about him and his mother
Well,
after
can we
the next
take
question. Yes.
The last
Yes.
question.
Wait, can you wait till the microphone? Yes.
I don't think I need that. Okay, just a quick question. Since you lived in Lebanon for a while, for a few years, I assume, and those were the good and bad years, because I was living there during that period. Do you have any plans to write any novels about Palestinian refugees or some highlight lives of some of the refugees in Lebanon?
Yeah, quickly. I am not going to write about the refugees in Lebanon. This is been written a lot about them, and Safra and Shatila, etc. So everyone knows the story.
I'm talking
I know.
about the daily life.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm going to say. I had the book before that, which is طعم الفرق, the taste of separation, generation of Palestine, memory of 3 generations of Palestine. That's covered the period from 1943, when my mother and father get married, up to end of nearly 70s. So I think if I have time and life, I will continue that part and cover that time, the 5 years I lived in Lebanon, with all the details there. Yeah, I will do that someday, if I could.
If I could, the mother character, since we, this is your character, but it's such a wonderful character. She has a sharp tongue, and if I could just read one passage, it's just one of my favorite passages. And this was very hard to translate, but it was a lot of fun. So this is early on in the novel. The character of Walid Dahman is young, and he's about to go study in, he's leaving Gaza. Turns out he doesn't realize he's leaving for 38 years, but he is. And his mother, it's his last day before going off to college. And he's going around buying different things in the neighborhood. And his mother is telling him, you better go visit your father's grave. And if you don't do that, I'm going to kill you. And actually, she's much more clever. She would never say that because her tongue is a little sharper than that. So, let's see, I'll start here. So, don't hide anything from your mother, Walid. What advice did your father give you? He's telling her about a dream. And he would tell her, sparks were shooting out of his eyes, and he asked me, has your mother remarried since my death, Walid? The mother would lose the last bits of sanity she still had. Yet, in that moment, his mother would not miss a beat. No, she'd reach into a store of curses so rare, she only pulled them out on special occasions like this. You want your mother wed? You'll soon be good and dead. You'll be buried before I'm married, boy. Go bury yourself next to your father and give me a break. The image in his mind made him laugh out loud. My mother is unbelievable, and so is that big bag of words she carries around with her. If you say wedlock, she might reply, get you in a headlock. Say, I'm going, and she might reply, to hell in a handbasket? Say, we're off, and she might answer, to choke on your own drool? Say, I'm falling asleep, I'm going to bed, and she might declare, hope the wall falls asleep on top of you. And do not say, Mama, I'm on my way, because she will definitely quip, to your funeral, let's go together. But when your mother is happy with you, her words turn from lead to gold. Say, I'm going, and she'll reply, to be happy and secure in life? Say, I'm going to go, and she will say, to heaven, my dear? I'm on my way becomes, to your wedding? We'll go together, and I'll sing for you, the happy groom. Yeah. The mother is
I don't know. No, unfortunately, she passed away last year, something. She's 84.
Well, I'm afraid we've come to the end of our session. I would like to leave the last word to you, Mr. Madhoun. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, just thank you for coming. I'm very glad. to be here with you, and thanks for everything.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Colla.